and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hundreds of migrant hotels are filling up all over the country. Now it's beginning to affect big wig Tories, including cabinet ministers, will be going live to a village in Northamptonshire whose population may be about to double. We'll discuss the government's new proposed trade union laws. Do they make sense for vital public services to continue, or are they an infringement of workers' rights? We'll talk about a cricket club that's being asked to close down because neighbours don't like balls thwacking against their fences. And Jason Cundy, former footballer and now successful broadcaster, will join me on Talking Pints. Before we get to that, let's have the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story this hour: unions have condemned a newly proposed law that will enforce minimum levels of service for public sector workers during strikes. And the government's confident it will be passed this year. The bill would apply to health, fire, education, transport and border security services. Under the new law, unions could be sued and staff could be sacked if adequate cover isn't provided. The leader of the RMT, though, has called it an attack on human rights, and the TUC says it's going to hold a national Protect the Right to Strike Day on the 1st of February. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, told Parliament the measures would protect the public.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
Well, Labour has vowed to repeal the legislation if it wins the next general election. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says the NHS was failing well before the strikes.
Is my constituent Bina, who waited over an hour for an ambulance, who died waiting for an ambulance, and that was not on a strike day. That is because of the disastrous chaos we have in the system under this Conservative government.
Primary school teachers across Scotland went on strike today, and secondary school teachers are due to walk out tomorrow after failing to reach a pay agreement with the Scottish Government. Unions are demanding a 10% pay rise, but the Scottish Government has offered 5%. Scotland's Education Secretary says she'll leave no stone unturned to find a quick resolution. The family of a British man who's gone missing in Ukraine say they're very worried and concerned about his health as well as his whereabouts. Ukrainian police say Chris Parry, who's aged 48, and another Brit, Andrew Bagshaw, who's 28, are voluntary workers. It's understood they left the city of Kramatorsk for the town of Soledar on Friday morning and were reported on Saturday evening missing. The region's currently under intense fighting between Kyiv and Moscow's forces. And as you've been hearing throughout the day here on GB News, Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, has become the fastest-selling non-fiction book ever, with 400,000 copies sold on launch day alone. But GB News has been uncovering some inconsistencies in the book, where the Duke of Sussex, for example, writes he heard about the death of his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, in a phone call whilst he says he was at Eton. But photographic evidence shows the Prince returning from a skiing trip to Switzerland with his father and brother at the time. Representatives of the Duke have been contacted for comment, but has so far declined to do so. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now, back to Farage.
Good evening. This programme has talked, I would guess, more than any other media programme about what's been going on in the English Channel. One of the reasons is much of mainstream media really didn't want to cover the story. It was all too awkward. But I do sometimes think we don't talk enough about the impact of tens of thousands of young single males coming into the country. At last count, 420 hotels around the country have been filled up with migrants. The waiting list of those whose asylum claims have not yet been processed is a staggering 140,000. And whilst the weather may have been very windy so far this year, some people estimate that up to 90,000 people could cross the English Channel this year unless the government actually does something. Well, of course, Rishi Sunak, in his one big speech since he's become Prime Minister, has said, Pledge 5, stop the boats. He will stop the boats. But frankly, we've been hearing this from Conservative leaders, from Home Secretaries, year after year after year, with no difference other than it simply just gets worse. Well, today we're going to look at a couple of case studies. One, which looks to me, although the villagers in Northamptonshire are about to lose. Another in Yorkshire, where there appears to have been a bit of a reprieve. But what does that mean for the rest of the country? And my simple question to you at home is that at what point do we simply say, enough? Let me know what you think. Farage at gbnews.uk. Well, let's go straight to rural Northamptonshire. And when I say rural, I mean it is rural. Cretan is a village of 500 residents. The hotel in question is a 17th century manor. Our reporter, Paul Hawkins, is there on the ground. Paul, this is Chris Heaton-Harris's constituency. What's the story?
So the story is, Nigel, that we are just outside Highgate House Manor Hotel, or as it was a couple of years ago. A hotel that's been closed for a couple of years because the family-run owners couldn't make it survive as a business through COVID. Now, they offloaded it to another company, and as we understand it, as the local Cretan Parish Council understand it, the Home Office are planning to put 400 asylum seekers, 400 migrants in this 87 ensuite bedroom former hotel, possibly towards the end of this month. Now, this came to the attention of the local parish council in Cretan, some 9 miles north of Northampton, last month. They've been having meetings at the local village hall. There's one planned to start in around about half an hour's time, where members of the public will be able to come and voice their concerns. But essentially what we're saying is that the villagers here feel that the village is out. There's only 500 people there. There's no pubs. There's one village shop. It's simply unsuitable for that that number of migrants to be housed so close to it. It simply doesn't have the infrastructure to deal with it. You mentioned Chris Heaton-Harris, who's a member of Rishi Sunak's cabinet. He's the local MP here. He's called it unsuitable as well, and he's been holding a consultation on his website. And we know from speaking to the chair of the parish council earlier today that they've had at least 350 responses, which have been funneled from their MP's website to the Home Office. The Home Office are considering those responses, and they'll write back to the parish council possibly next week. And West Northamptonshire Council as well have called it significant concern. The plan would place services under unreasonable and unsustainable pressure. This is not acceptable. And just to give you an idea of what the Home Office is saying as well, it said it doesn't comment on operational arrangements for individual sites used for asylum accommodation. It says we engage with local authorities as early as possible whenever sites are used for asylum accommodation and work to ensure arrangements are safe for hostel residents and local people. But you've covered this many times, Nigel, on your show. You know, there's more people are applying for asylum. We know that. If you think of it like a pipeline, asylum applications are taking a lot longer to progress. The average processing time now 15 months, and I know from having spoken to some asylum seekers myself, they've been waiting in the country for years. So more people are waiting to have their asylum processed, and simply there is not sufficient accommodation to house them while their applications are being processed. And so that's why we're seeing so many hotels being requisitioned by the Home Office to try and deal with the backlog.
Paul Hawkins from Cretan, thank you very much, and we'll come back to you when that public meeting in the village hall begins. Thank you. Well, it's a beautiful hotel. It's a 17th century manor. It boasts a swimming pool, a gymnasium, games rooms, flat screen TVs, and a very good restaurant, I'm told. So it's not too bad, really, is it? You've hopped on a boat, you live in Albania, and you spend a few weeks in that hotel before going off to join a drugs gang or something like that. I'm not surprised the local residents are very, very angry, but here is the point. In the past, 3 big companies have been assigned by the Home Office to organise accommodation, and they've booked 9 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it may be, in hotels. In this case, the hotel is actually being purchased, and a deal done, in this case, with Serco. So it looks like this will be a permanent site for those that enter our country through a variety of means and claim asylum, and that perhaps makes the villagers there even more worried. Now, similarly, there was a big public meeting that took place last Friday up in East Yorkshire in a place called Cottingham. And the plan there was that a couple of halls of residence at Hull University were on the market to be sold. Once again, as I say, with this new development, they would have become permanent sites. There was a big public meeting. I don't know what the atmosphere was, but Louise Aikster was there. We've spoken to her before, a care worker and somebody who was there at that public meeting. Louise, what was the atmosphere like last Friday evening in Cottingham?
It was amazing, to be quite honest with you, how so many members of the community, you know, had made the effort to join together and unite against all of it. There was so much passion in that room and so many strong views and opinions, and it was great. It was a really good turnout.
Now, it would seem, Louise, that there is a reprieve, that there's been a change, that the university are not now going to sell these halls of residence. So do you view this as a victory for your local community, or really is all you're doing passing the problems on to another neighbour?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we do want to take this as a victory after, you know, everything that everybody's been through these past few years. You know, surely we have something to celebrate at last. But there is obviously still the occurring problem that where are they going to go if not to the lawns in Cottingham?
No, absolutely. Well, Louise, thank you very much indeed once again for joining me on the programme. Now, the local Member of Parliament for Cottingham is a certain David Davis MP, who joins me now. And David put out a message earlier saying, this is good news. And you basically said that you and the other MPs had lobbied and that the Home Office have, or it's either the Home Office or the university, have listened.
Well, let's be clear, it's not the Home Office, it's the university.
University.
It's the university, very clearly. You've got a new Vice-Chancellor, he'd arrived, got financial difficulties, as all institutions have. He's got this £6 or £7 million asset on his doorstep, and he goes to sell it effectively to the Home Office or its representative. And we said to him, you know, what about your local community? And to be fair to him, he took it on board and he made the decision. He actually made the decision a little while ago, but we said, please publicise it. He did.
OK. So that is good news for you as a sitting MP. That's good news. But you see,
and for the people of Cottingham, most important.
And Louise clearly was very pleased, and she said, "You know, we all need a bit of good news after the last couple of years." And I agree with her on that. I agree with her on that. But you see, the thing is, David, that the inner city hotels are all full.
Yeah.
So they're now seeking rural market town locations. Sir Graham Brady, Hale, in his constituency, is about to get a hotel. Chris Heaton-Harris tonight, I'm not sure there's anything he or the local parish council can do about the private sale of a building. No. Frankly, nothing they can do. So what we're now seeing is direct pressure coming on some very senior figures within the Conservative Party. You know, I've watched this. We
all have.
You know, for the last 12 years, Conservative leaders and Home Secretaries have said we're going to stop illegal immigration. You come here illegally, Cameron said, Boris said, they all said, you know, you'll be sent away. But it never ever happens. We used to deport a lot of illegals going back 15, 20 years. Hardly any get deported. You know, handfuls get deported these days. Your government was elected to take back control of our borders. There's a huge price to pay for this, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I reckon it's in the top 4 issues that will decide whether or not Conservative governments return next time. You know, it's 1, 2, 3 or 4. I don't know. It depends on the day almost. And of course, these aren't solutions. These are a luster plus. I mean, they're permanent for the community, but they're not a permanent solution to the problem. Because if you've got, well, let's put your 90,000 to one side. Just this year, 45,000. Even if that goes on and they aren't being resolved, you're ending up with a never-ending demand for places that are not there. And what's more, by the way, I mean, we had a smaller version of this thing called Thwaite Hall in my constituency, where they're coming in. The first 100 that arrived, in the first week, 30 disappeared. They were all Albanians. The locals tell me, I can't prove it, but like I say, they were all driven away in a fleet of cars. Presumably, as you were saying, the Albanian gangs that brought them over are exacting a price, whatever that might be, work on our, whatever it is they're doing. So, you know, there's got to be a stop. This is why, before Christmas, 50 of us wrote to Rishi saying, look, there's one thing you can do fast. I mean, this is the problem. You need a fast solution. And one thing you can do fast is say, Albania's a safe country. It's got fewer references to the European Court of Human Rights than we have. I should be able to claim asylum in Tirana, particularly when the whips get to me. But the simple truth is you've got to do something fast. And actually, if we said, as Sweden has done, that, you know, Albania's a safe country, then...
Yes, and zero applications in Germany and in France, and yet 12 or 14,000 thus far are here.
I went just down the road here to see the National Crime Agency to talk about the Albanians, right? The Albanian gang. And they said to me, they had a wonderful phrase. They said, they're the most efficient criminals in the world. I've never heard the word efficient used about criminals. I said, what does that mean? They said, well, when they say they're going to do something, they do it, and they spot market opportunities. That's what this is for them. It's a ruthless, cruel, sadistic almost market opportunity. They looked at the approval rates for asylum. As you say, most of Europe, 0. Here, 55%.
And once you've absconded, you're gone. You're gone. And you're not going to be found. And even if you are, you've probably got a chance of staying. David, honestly, is Rishi Sunak going to do anything to make a difference?
Well, I think he is.
Honestly.
I think he is. I mean, I think, you know, he's seized of the issue, because I've talked to him about it in terms, face to face, not in a grand meeting, just him and me. And he's seized of the issue. He understands what I've been arguing, which is the Albanian issue. That doesn't solve it all. No. That's half of it.
It'd be a start.
It'd be a huge start. Imagine, I mean, we've made a big deal about Rwanda. Rwanda, if it works, will be 500 people this year, maybe 3,000 next. If we stop the Albanian traffic, it's 12,000 straight away and every year thereafter. And then that allows you to get on top of the rest. Now, the others, you've got a problem. The problem with the others, some of them let's say an Afghan who's worked for the British government has got a real moral claim.
And we get that.
And so we have to deal with that. But there are lots of others that we don't need to give that approval to, and that's the more hard. That's the difficult bit. The first bit, the Albanians, we can do very, very quickly.
David,
indeed.
all the while, we have the British judges that we have, and we're signatories to the ECHR. We're not going to solve this, are we?
Well, you say that, but look, Sweden, social democratic country, held up as the model of modern civilization, and they've got zero. How did they get zero? They rewrote their laws, not now, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they saw this coming. 2 years ago, and they rewrote the laws to say, if you define as a safe country, it isn't just Albania, by the way, it's Albania, Mongolia, Serbia, all safe countries, you get sent straight back. No question, at the border.
Well, I think the battle against the British judges would become the real issue there.
The Swedes saw it coming and stopped it with the law. That's what we have to do.
We saw it coming here on GB News. We've been talking about it ever since the day we launched. David, thank you for joining me. Well done for your constituents. Yeah. But the problem is rather like a wing three-quarters rugby ball. It moves on to somebody else. In a moment, we're going to talk about Grant Shapps' new proposals for trade union laws that would mean, even on strike days, you could still, perhaps, get an ambulance. Is he right? Is that the sensible thing to do? Is it honouring a 2019 manifesto commitment, or is it a terrible abuse of workers' rights? All of that in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instinct was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
What does now even 17th century manners fill up with young men who've just crossed the English Channel? When are we going to say enough? Some of your responses. Dee says almost a decade ago. Charles says we never will. Belinda says, where are they all going to go to get processed? Aren't we already overpopulated? Another viewer says, if they haven't listened to us so far, they never will. And Sue says, menacingly, at the next election, we have to punish them at the ballot box. And, you know, David Davis was quite frank about that this is one of the top 3 or 4 issues that will decide whether the Conservatives can win the next election. I loved his optimism that somehow Rishi Sunak is going to do something to sort this out. I don't believe it for a minute. Now, different issue. In the 2019 manifesto, the one in which they got an 80-seat majority, the Conservatives promised that when it came to vital public services and strikes, they would put through legislation to give us a minimum level of service and to do so in order to protect the public. Grant Shapps was up this morning before the House of Commons proposing this legislation.
To deny and to vote against legislation that brings in minimum safety levels to help our constituents is to attack their security and their welfare.
OK, that was Shapps putting out the case. So what do we think? Is this the right thing to do? You know, is it right that we make sure that there is some level of ambulance service, of A&E service, or whatever else it may be, with fire brigade, whatever else it may be? Is that the right thing to do, or is it an outrageous attack on the rights of the individual to withhold their labour? I have to say, there are not many things this government puts forward that I think are right, but I think this does make sense to me. Now, of course, there are all sorts of definitions as to what that minimum level of service would be. And would people who rejected it really get sacked and not be able to claim unfair dismissal? We're getting into deeper legal arguments that I can deal with, but I am joined by Amanda Lennon, employment lawyer, who not only deals with these things, but has read the legislation. So it's quite clear that the government are trying to honour a manifesto commitment, which I do applaud, and we can argue the rights and wrongs of this. Having seen what Shapps has put down today before the Commons, what is your response?
My view is that this is the government pushed into a last resort scenario, and I believe that this particular timing at least stems from the fact that before Christmas the unions representing the ambulance drivers refused to agree certain minimum levels of service in advance if the ambulance drivers went on strike, and so this is an obvious reaction to that. But in putting this bill forward, Grant Shapps has also included lots of other sectors that provide public services, such as transport and the NHS and the fire service. So it's quite a broad brush, and we will need tightly worded regulations to make sure that these powers can't be abused by employers.
So on the one hand, he's showing the country he's tough because we're in the grip of many, many simultaneous strikes. But in reality, this consultation process, this attempt to define what a minimum level of service is and to pass all this into law, it's going to take a couple of years, isn't it?
Well, I think that this is an example of something that will be very much brought forward, just as the debate on being able to bring in agency workers to cover striking workers last year. So I believe it will be debated next week, and then it will pass to the House of Lords. It may go back with changes or rejections, who knows? But I think this is one of the acts that will be sped up, given the severity of the situation.
OK, but we still have to have that consultation.
Yes, we do.
We still have to have that definition.
Yeah.
Now, is it, just trying to be even-handed about them? By the way, I think this is the right legislation, and I remember the last time a Conservative government put through radical trade union reform in the mid-1980s, it did make this country a place foreign investors wanted to come to. So I think there are times when this is the right thing to do. But would it take away, or could it, let me ask you that, could it take away the basic rights in a free society of workers to withhold their labour?
Well, in one sense, it is quite undemocratic, and that's what the unions have been saying today in response to this news. Because if you follow the rules on balloting and you get to the point where you've got lawful strike action, the employer in these sectors can, at pretty much the last minute, say, you're not going to leave me with enough to provide a minimum service. So I'm going to put the brakes on that. So in that sense, it does fundamentally undermine the right of workers to go on strike in those sectors.
And what about the right of people if they had a heart attack to get an ambulance?
Well, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? And I think that there's going to be a lot of public support for this bill because of the impact on public services. And we've heard horror stories of people waiting hours and hours for ambulances and waiting in hospitals in the corridor.
Mind you, the truth is they were doing that before any strikes were happening anyway.
I'm sure they were, but I think it's come to the fore now. Because the sides have been so polarised before Christmas in their pay negotiations. They've reached a stalemate and the government's now taking these drastic steps to try and unpick that, I think.
Given that a lot of employment law and legislation when we were members of the European Union was effectively coming from there, is this a piece of legislation that would have been much harder to propose if we were still EU members?
I don't think it would necessarily, because there are lots of countries in the EU that have a similar law. And it's important to note this is not a general veto by the employer to avoid people going on strike. It's very much used in specific circumstances to provide minimum levels of service. So that doesn't mean that all workers will be stopped from going on strike. That type of principle operates in several countries in Europe already. For example, Germany, France, Italy, Spain.
OK.
So it's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon. No, look, well, it's going to be very, very interesting about it. Come back and tell us at some point what this minimum level of service actually is, because it seems to me that much of this will hinge around that, and in particular, how long this game of parliamentary ping-pong could potentially go on for. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. In a moment, we'll talk about the cricket club. Yes, the cricket club that isn't going to play cricket this year because a neighbour, an incomer, has objected to a cricket ball thwacking against her fence.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's something about people that leave big cities. They often sell properties that are worth quite a lot of money, and they move to the countryside or they move to the seaside, but they tend to take their big metropolitan values with them. You know, they move next to pubs and then complain that people are making noise. They move to a seaside port and complain that at times it smells of fish, or there are people that get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start their boat engines. They complain about the local shoot, the local hunt, whatever it may be. They generally come from London, not always. Well, extraordinary story. I mean, village cricket is absolutely part of our national life, and particularly at a time when our cricket team is enjoying success that I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime under the brave, wonderful, gallant Ben Stokes as captain. And yet Coal Hill Sports and Social Club in Dorset, which has within it Coal Hill Cricket Club, has been told by the owners of the ground that this season it will not be able to play cricket because a neighbour has objected. Yes, an outsider who has come into the club, bought a house, objects to the fact that cricket balls thwack against her fence and that once, you know, a ball went up and damaged one of the roof tiles. I would suggest that if you move to a small village in Dorset next to a sports ground, you should expect people on lazy Sunday afternoons to be out there playing village cricket. The club has set up a petition. 10,000 people had signed that petition overnight. I'm going to sign that petition, and I will try and get somebody from Coal Hill Sports and Social Club on this programme tomorrow. We have to keep our cultural communities going and not have outsiders coming in and changing a place where cricket has been played ever since the end of the First World War. The What the Farage moment. Now, you know, we were all told you've got to save the planet. You've got to get an electric car. And indeed, this government, you know, outlawing the sale of diesel and petrol cars from 2035. I never thought it would happen, but try this for size. One of the big advantages of going electric is it was all so much cheaper. I emphasise, it was all so much cheaper until now. If you are on a long journey in this country right now, you will need to stop on the motorway at one of the fast chargers. Well, when I say stop at one of the fast chargers, there may well be quite a long queue, given how busy our roads are, to even find a charger that's working or one that's free. But when you do, you know, you'll spend the time there and get the charge in your car. But it is now going to cost you, driving an electric car, an approximation of 20p per mile in terms of what you'll pay for that electricity charge, as opposed to 17p per mile if you're driving an unleaded petrol car. It is now more expensive to drive an electric car on a long journey than it is to use unleaded, and not much different to what it would be if you were filling up with diesel. All of the so-called advantages of going with electric cars are disappearing before the revolution even really begins to take off. And here in London, the situation is absolutely farcical. The very few charging points that we have, very often you'll see a commercial van that is on one of those points, and all the while they're plugged into the system, they're not liable to pay any parking fees. And so that's the great racket that is going on in London. If we're going to have an electric car revolution, let me tell you something, we've got a lot further to go, not to mention where on earth are we going to find all of the electricity on days when the wind doesn't blow. Next, it's time for Talking Pints. We haven't gone back to the village in Northamptonshire. The meeting's on. We cannot get an internet connection. We will report back on later programmes on GB News tonight as to how that meeting has gone. But in a moment, it's Talking Pints, and I'll be joined by former professional footballer, broadcaster, cancer survivor, Jason Cundy. All of that in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
The GB News Tavern is now open. It is time for Talking Pints. I'm joined by Jason Cundy. Jason, welcome.
Nigel, Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you for inviting me.
Not one bit. Now, Jason, the young Jason, football fan, football fanatic.
Yeah.
And it was blue is the colour, football is the game,
Yes.
we're all together and Chelsea is... I mean, it was Chelsea all the way for you,
It was. My dad took me there for my 7th birthday in back in... early 1976, 1977, to Stamford Bridge, and that just lit my love for Chelsea. And I'm lucky enough to still be working there, Nigel. So yes, so Chelsea was always my club, and it comes down to my dad, and it's one of the father to son relationships that never ever dies if you follow your football club forever.
Yeah, we had Ken Bates on the programme the other week.
I know Batesy very well.
Dear old Ken.
I know Batesy very well.
Who did Chelsea a lot of good.
Yeah.
But for you, so you're a young lad, you're 7, you've got the magic of Stamford Bridge,
Yep.
you become a junior player at the club, and it's kind of, there must be huge numbers of young lads, and now girls, out there, and they've got the team they support, and their biggest dream in life, really, is to play for that team.
Indeed.
And you actually managed to do it.
Yeah, there aren't many. Look, every footballer that grows up supports a club. I was lucky enough to play for the club that I supported and loved and still work for now. I've had a love affair with Chelsea since I could walk, and I'm still lucky enough to work for Chelsea TV now. So yes, it's one of those things that you don't think about as a young boy. You just you follow your dream, you follow your club, and I feel privileged to still be involved with the club that I loved, and I was so lucky to play and still work for Chelsea.
I guess going out onto the pitch for your first full game, that must have been a bit special.
It was. I remember at Sunderland at home. I was at fault for the first goal. I remember that. We won. My debut was away, played against QPR. But you know, all those years that I watched Chelsea from the terraces in the shed as a young boy, and then getting a schoolboy, and then an apprenticeship, and then a pro to go and play for the club I love.
So lots of years of hard work to get there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, you don't get to that level without sacrificing and hard work and doing what. It was easy to a point because it was something I loved, but there are points in your career where you do have to sacrifice, you know, going out and having to be disciplined and looking after yourself. And yeah, I mean, I go with the word privilege. I feel lucky, but at the same time, every boy wants that, and I was the less than 1% that got there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you went on in later years. You know, you played a lot of games for Ipswich, and you know, in the end, your career is ended by injury, which of course is the bane of all sportsmen. Yeah. Isn't that the big fear in professional sport?
It is, and you know what, Nigel? I went to Spurs. I hardly played at Spurs through injuries. I was there 4 or 5 years. I had a back injury. I broke my ankle. Had an operation on my ankle, my knee, and eventually I had to leave Spurs to go further my career. I went to Ipswich, and George Burley really did save my career in some ways. And I spent 2.5 happy years at Ipswich. So yes, injuries is the one thing that every professional sportsman, not just footballer, fears. And unfortunately for me, I had my unfair share. And you know, even after and football, even during football, I suffered illness as well. So it does feel a little bit like what lucky stick did I hit on the way down? But
well, yeah, it's a funny one that, Jason, isn't it? Whether you have good luck or bad luck in life, because bad things can happen to us in life. But you and I are both sitting here having a chat and a drink, and we have one thing in common.
Correct.
That you, at the time you were at Ipswich, discovered a medical problem.
Correct.
And I want you to share that with us.
So I was sitting at home watching EastEnders, of all things. And
it takes all sorts.
It does. And I just happened to put my hands down my shorts, and I thought,
like you do.
Every man listening to this knows what I'm talking about. It happened, and I'm like, what is that? And one ball was heavier and larger than the other, and I thought, this doesn't feel right. I showed the physio the next day, and I saw the doctor on the Saturday, and he said to me, "You can't play." I'm like, what do you mean I can't play? I'm playing. I'm in the team. This is, an hour and a half before kickoff. I'm playing. He said, we've got to get you in for a scan. And I'm, right, forget that. I'm playing, right? So when I played and they tried to get me in for a scan after the game, the earliest they could get me in was on the Monday after the Saturday.
Yeah.
We won 1-0, by the way, on that day.
Well, that's what really matters.
That's about it. And the nurses were waiting outside for me in the hospital, and I knew something wasn't right. I went in and I had an ultrasound scan, and within 10, 15 seconds, they scanned my ball and they said, yeah, this has got to come out. And I'm like,
I know.
What? I felt my palms went sweaty. I could feel how many people's palms sweat. And I'm like, what do you mean? They said, there's a tumour. And there's only one word you think of when you hear the word tumour, and it's cancer. And I said, is it cancer? And they said, we don't know yet. It's got to come out. And the following day, I went back up to Ipswich and had the operation.
I went through the same thing.
I know.
I was a bit younger than I was 21. You were 26 or 7, I think, at the time. Yeah, it is a heck of a shock. And yet, you're sitting here talking about it, and I rarely do talk about it, to be honest with you.
Why?
I don't know. I suppose most men,
It's happened
feel awkward about these things, and isn't that really the point here, that this is one of those cancers that actually can be detected early because it is outside as opposed to an internal organ.
Yep.
So it can be detected early, and yet there are quite a lot of young men who think something's wrong, it'll get better, it'll be all right, and they're the ones that finish up in trouble, aren't they?
They are the ones, and I felt duty-bound, actually, Nigel, to talk about it. I'm very open and honest about it and talk about it. I don't feel ashamed because it's part of, a lot of men. I was very privileged and lucky that I could go into a dressing room and speak to a physio, speak to a doctor, speak to a surgeon on a daily basis, and walk in naked, no. That's what we did as footballers. That's what we do, believe it or not, and say, look, there's something wrong with this. Can you have a look at it? So I was quite lucky. And I'd lived in that lifestyle since I was a very young man. And the message should be, don't be ashamed, because there are doctors there, that's their job, to look and study and work out what's wrong with you. So, I don't have a problem talking about it. It's quite easy, and like I said, I feel almost duty bound to speak out about it.
Now, you had to have a dose of chemotherapy.
Yes, I did.
Which is never a whole barrel of laughs for anybody.
No, it's not.
But you did manage to have children after this.
I did.
Which is unusual.
It is. So my previous wife, Lizzie, who you know very well.
She's been on Talking Pints.
She's been on Talking Pints. No, I don't doubt that for 1 second. We get on very well now. But so at the time I had one son, Joshua, who's now 28, and I was advised to store some sperm. This was back in 1997. Yeah. And this is before I had my second son, James, who's now 22. And naturally, I conceived with James. But unfortunately, what happened was 3 or 4 years later, I then had, my oncologist said, have an operation on the other side to check if I was going to have cancer on the other side. And unfortunately, it revealed less than 1,000 men a year have it, is that I was going to have testicular cancer in the other side. No. So that's very dangerous for a man. If you lose both balls, Nigel, you're in big trouble. There's a lot of complications. So I was left with two choices: to either I try and conceive another son or another child, or I remove the ball and have radiotherapy. So it was left with one option: just remove the ball. I've got two healthy boys. Yeah. Remove the ball, and the radiotherapy cleared it up. Luckily enough, now I've still got half a ball left, right? Which I'm very grateful for.
Too much information, but
I'm happy for. Yeah. But I stored that sperm back in 1997, and the good news story is that 17 years later, that sperm was frozen, and it was defrosted, and I now have an 8-year-old boy, Leonardo.
Which is pretty amazing.
Which is the unbelievable ability of science to freeze sperm for nearly 18 years.
That's incredible.
And 18 years later, out pops little Leonardo.
Well, you've been through the mill with injury and with health. You really have.
I've had my fair share of bad...
You have.
But I'm a lucky boy, though,
Well, I'm
a lucky boy.
But this is it. I've had all sorts of things go wrong with plane crashes and goodness knows what else. And I think to myself, was I unlucky or was I lucky? Well, we're both still sitting here, so we're both lucky.
Do you know what? I can look back and say, have I had my fair share of bad luck? And the answer to that question is yes. Have I had my fair share of good luck? And the answer to that question is yes. So I don't sit here and look back and wallow in what could have been. And I now look ahead and say what I've got now. And like you said, I retired from at 29 from football. And I now work in the media. And
you've got this whole new Jason Cundy career. And of course, you do the Chelsea TV, but it's talk sport radio, isn't it? Yes. Which I have to say, you have got, you guys on that channel, you have got, for people who are really big football fans, you have got a very, very devout following, and you seem to, well, firstly, love being a broadcaster.
Do you know what, Nigel? We're lucky because, yes, I have the ability to voice an opinion. I love voicing my opinion. And football's been my life.
You love controversy, don't you?
We both know James Whale, right? We have a mutual friend who we both love. But that's what sport and football in particular. It's tribal. It's based on opinions. It's based on your team doing well, better than the other side. But I've been lucky enough since I left school at the age of 16 to still be employed by football in some shape or form. Yeah. Whether it be as a player, an apprentice, a pro, coaching, in the media, doing other jobs. And, this has been like a 35-year lucky. I owe football a huge amount. I'm incredibly lucky.
But just because you can play football doesn't mean you can be a broadcaster.
No, that's true.
What do you think the skill are to be a radio broadcaster? I can talk,
Nigel. I talk and I've got an opinion. And there are many people, many footballers out there who have had a far more illustrious career than I have had. Yeah, I was fortunate that TalkSport gave me the chance. And I'd done the shows. They give me more shows, and now I present. And I've been there, since 2004. Yeah. So I have the ability to somehow They keep employing me. There's the question.
Yeah.
You asked yourself,
No.
how do you still get work?
Well, I get kicked out occasionally,
Right,
but there we are.
yes. Yeah, and that,
no, it really works. And of course, the time of day you broadcast gives you great latitude and freedom, doesn't it?
It does. I'll be leaving here. I'm on air tonight at 10 o'clock. Talk Sports Bar if anyone wants to go and listen. We're lucky enough. There's going to be Carabao Cup quarterfinals tonight, so straight after here we're going to go there. And we react after that, the phone in. So, yeah, it works. TalkSport is a brilliant, brilliant radio station. I'm incredibly lucky to have been working there so long.
No, it's brilliant. And a final thought about football. You know, you think when you were playing, we're going back 30 years when you started playing professional football. Well, there we are. That's the truth.
Leave it out.
Is it ever more dominated by money today than it was then?
No, I think money's always dominated. Liverpool were the richest team in the country back in the 80s, and they showed their money back then. More so now because you can see it. You can now see the money.
Yeah.
Back then, the richest clubs tended to be the best clubs because they got the best players. Liverpool sold Kevin Keegan, they bought Kenny Dalglish.
Yeah.
But now more so because there's foreign investors. Name me a sport that doesn't have money.
Yeah, well, actually, with the Saudis getting involved...
Name me a sport, any sport.
I mean, there's more and more money coming into sport everywhere.
Sport that doesn't have money.
No, there is. Jason Cundy, great guest. Thank you for coming on Talking Pints.
You're a star.
Great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, bud.
Cheers. OK, we've got a couple of minutes left on the programme. It is time for, as is customary, for Barrage the Farage. What have you got for me today? Mickey asks me, is reconciliation between Harry and the royal family feasible after the TV interviews and the book? Do you know what I think, Mickey? I think that a father can probably almost forgive a son anything. But I don't think a brother can. If I was William, I'm not sure I could ever forgive him for what he's done. What do you make of it all?
I wonder about Harry, whether Harry needs... I think there might be something deeper and darker going on with Harry. I know I'm stating the obvious there. I've got a brother that I love very dearly, I get him very well, but I've had my rows. It feels like he's burnt bridges, and he knows what he's doing, or does he? Or does he? I don't know whether he knows.
I don't know, but he's trashed his family, trashed his country, trashed the monarchy.
I don't know whether he knows. I don't know.
No. Well, if I was his brother, I wouldn't forgive him in a hurry. That's all I can really say to that. Let's take another one. One viewer asks, do you agree that unless something significant changes, like the emergence of a new political party, there is no plausible option for the electorate at the next election? Oh, no, David Davis told us earlier Rishi's going to sort the whole thing out, stop the boats crossing the channel, and life's going to be great. Look, I've got to tell you, I happen to think the irony of Brexit is the modern-day Conservative Party is more like an EU-style Social Democrat Party, and Labour's very similar. You don't do politics, Jason, but...
Thank God for that. Honestly, I'm sitting here sweating, thinking, please,
I mean,
don't
when you look at what happened over there in the course of 2022, pretty embarrassing, wasn't it?
What are you about? What are you talking about? What happened?
3 prime ministers, you name it. No, he's not going to play.
I don't know.
He's not going to play.
Honestly, I'm used to 3 managers in a season at Chelsea.
Well, I tell you what, I'm not sure this one's going to last very long, given the way Chelsea are going.
Don't go there. Don't you dare.
We're out of time. The Chelsea manager will not survive the rest of this season. Believe you me. And he'll be admitting on Chelsea TV that I was right. I'm going to hand you over to Patrick Christie's right now.
What a show that was. I've been laughing away here, Nigel. Great stuff, Nigel Farage there. Right, OK, I've got absolutely loads coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, including a whopping great big GB News exclusive about this migrant hotel where basically there's 500 residents in the local area. The Home Office wants to plonk 400 asylum seekers in this particular town. It's happening right across the country. It's unacceptable. Not my words. The actual Home Office has told us that it's unacceptable. You're the one doing it, lads. I've got all that coming your way and much, much, much more with me, Patrick Christie's in for Mark Stein.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Spare finally hits shelves, Dan gives his unflinching verdict on Prince Harry's tome of hate. The nation's top royal experts and insiders will weigh in too, including Angela Levin, biographer of the Queen Consort, plus Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie.